Good morning, dear church family. I pray that you are all well on this Monday morning. Even if, like me, you're starting to feel more and more worn down as the days and the weeks move on in this time of quarantine. And yet, as we're going to see in our psalm for this morning, Psalm 4, the Lord has put a joy in our hearts that is not touchable by our present circumstances. And so I pray that you're trusting in the Lord. For me, really, times like this are why the Psalms are so important. It's why I wanted to just start looking at the Psalms with you in these little devotionals that I'm doing. Really, the Psalms are important for all seasons of life. As I said when we started back in Psalm 1, there's various seasons that we go through as we go through the Psalms, and we see the psalmist expressing particular things in particular seasons. But in the difficulties of our present circumstances right now, I think these Psalms and the one that we're going to look at this morning have a particular meaning and significance. And so I invite you, if you have a Bible handy, to look with me at Psalm 4. And I'll go ahead and read it and say a few things about it. Psalm 4, to the choir master with stringed instruments, a psalm of David. Answer me when I call, O God of my righteousness. You have given me relief when I was in distress. Be gracious to me and hear my prayer. O men, how long shall my honor be turned into shame? How long will you love vain words and seek after lies? But know that the Lord has set apart the godly for himself. The Lord hears when I call to him. Be angry and do not sin. Ponder in your own hearts on your beds and be silent. Offer right sacrifices and put your trust in the Lord. There are many who say, who will show us some good? Lift up the light of your face upon us, O Lord. You have put more joy in my heart than they have when their grain and wine abound. In peace I will both lie down and sleep, for you alone, O Lord, make me dwell in safety. I think that a lot of times when we think about the life of prayer, we can have this picture in our minds of like the ideal life of prayer is sort of like a Bob Ross painting, right? You know, you have this nice serene picture with happy trees and mountains in the background and a nice little cabin and furry little woodland creatures scampering about and happy little bushes and all these sorts of things and a quiet stream. And part of the reason for that is that is some of the imagery that we find in the Psalms. But the reality is that that's not the way life is in the real world, usually. That's a picture of the peace and the serenity and the joy and the hope that is in the Lord. Yes, the streams of living water and the tree planted by the stream, Psalm 1. Right, but really as believers in Jesus Christ, we live our lives sort of on two different planes. We live our lives on these two levels where we have the things that we hope in the Lord, and those things are eternally peaceful, joyful, hopeful. But we also have the changing circumstances and seasons in our lives, and so there's a sort of rhythm in how we in the Psalms themselves that we kind of go through when we go through these Psalms. There's a rhythm to the Psalter, alternating between the chaos of our life circumstances and the joy that we have in the Lord. And really, we see that rhythm in this very psalm. We sort of see it, particularly if you look at verses 2 and 3, you have the how long of verse 2, right? How long is the situation going to continue. How long shall my honor be turned into shame? How long will you love vain words and seek after lies? But then we have the confidence of verse 3. But know that the Lord has set apart the godly for himself. The Lord hears when I call to him. So that in all situations in our lives, even the chaotic and the times where we're tempted to, when we need to cry out, how long? Like, how long is this pandemic going to continue? How long will the coronavirus be wreaking havoc on our society? How long will this happen? But know that the Lord has set apart the godly for himself. The Lord hears when I call to him. When I utter that cry, how long? Confidence that God hears. And so one of my favorite verses in the Psalms is verse 7. And you see this confidence of what the Lord has given to us in verse 7. You have put more joy in my heart than they have when their grain and wine abound. Even if all of my earthly possessions were taken away from me, and there was scarcity of food and drink, and there's no toilet paper in the in the aisles in the grocery store, that doesn't affect the joy that the Lord has put in my heart. That joy is more than anything, any earthly thing in this world can ever touch. And so you look at the outer edges of the Psalm, Psalm 4. We have sort of, if you look at verse 1 and verse 8, the Psalm starts off with David remembering how the Lord had given him relief in the past. You have given me relief when I was in distress. Be gracious to me and hear my prayer. And then at the very end, he has this confidence that the Lord will give that relief again, because the Lord has done that in the past, and God is the same yesterday and today and forever. In peace I will both lie down and sleep, for you alone, O Lord, make me dwell in safety. That is the confidence with which this psalm ends. You get the rhythm back and forth between trust and frustration with the present circumstances, but ultimately being absorbed in this confidence that peace is coming, because our God is a God of peace, and he is the same yesterday and today and forever. And so the very middle, and I'll close on this, the very middle, verses 4 and 5 is a calling for us. Be angry and do not sin. Ponder in your own hearts on your beds and be silent. Offer right sacrifices and put your trust in the Lord. There are many things to be angry about in this world. And to be sure, be angry. There's anger is a God-given emotion that in a world where sin and unrighteousness and injustice and inequity are all around us, and where suffering and death and sickness are present. You know, when Jesus stood at the tomb of Lazarus, and it says that he was deeply moved in his spirit and greatly troubled. That there's a sense in which that language in the Greek there was he was raging within at what death does to people in the world. And other places, like when he went into the temple and cleansed the temple. You have made my Father's house a den of robbers. Anger is not in itself a sinful emotion. It's what we do with it. And so here, be angry and do not sin. Ponder in your own hearts on your beds and be silent. Don't use that anger as a way to lash out and become unhinged, but turn that toward the Lord. Offer right sacrifices and put your trust in the Lord. The first response to our anger is to go to the Lord with it in prayer. And so today, beloved, whatever you are experiencing within yourself, offer right sacrifices, a sacrifice of praise and thanksgiving, a sacrifice of reaching out to others in need in the love of Christ, and put your trust in the Lord. And as you do that, you have this confidence, you have this promise that he will be with you in that. In peace you will both lie down and sleep, for the Lord alone makes you dwell in safety. Amen. Thanks be to God. The Lord be with you today.